Hello and welcome to Zak's Traders Cafe. Today I'm joined by Christoper Nicholson, who is Managing Director at ACF Equity Research. How are you today, Christopher?
Zach, I'm very good, except for the terrible cold that's been going around with everybody, which I seem to have got.
Well, that means you're not very good. But I've been sort of mixing with people all week, and I'm as healthy and as fresh as a daisy. I'm feeling quite smug about it. You're the
I think,
third person I've spoken to out of like the last 10 who got it, bronchitis, COVID, death, that kind of thing. So there we are. But it
well,
must
I
be
avoided COVID, but
must
you
be
clearly
my
have a better immune system.
must be my healthy lifestyle, which certainly isn't it. Maybe that's it, kills all the viruses. You're obviously too healthy. But I said you're a managing director at ACF Equity Research, which if some people with slightly longer memories, maybe just before the pandemic, I will remember that ACF wrote a research note on a company called Eurasia Mining when the shares were like 3 or 4p, and they subsequently went to 40p for about 10 minutes, I think it was. But the company was then worth £1 billion, and I'm sure shareholders would love it if that company was now worth £1 billion because they'd all be rich and retired. Um, but is Eurasia Mining and companies, the small cap companies, what you do? Is that what you write research notes on? What's your focus?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Zach. We tend to look at companies that we think have an interesting story. I think the maximum that we cover is about $8 billion market cap, something along those lines. We do look at things like Tesla and Google and Microsoft from time to time, but clearly that's more out of interest and to keep the team skills together as much as anything else.
Right. So, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted you on the call, and hopefully there'll be many more if you survive your current sniffle, would be, there's something this even, I look at every RNS every day, right? So, small cap area, I'm looking at all the time. But there are some times where you just think, well, is that company the real deal? Is it just waffle? Is it actually as brilliant as I think? And you sort of, there's nobody, no sort of trusted person in the market really, because obviously you ask a broker, they'll say, "Oh yes, well we're the broker in the company. It's fantastic." The research note people, obviously, we've initiated, a note on this company, so well, maybe they're biased. Uh, like investors and other people like that. Well, some people, most people who invest are not very good at it by definition, and there's no point asking a journalist because journalists don't actually like the stock market. So there are very few people you can call to, and actually the worst thing is people are actually really good at them. Great investors, people who really know their stuff. They don't actually want to tell anyone because they don't want to sort of reveal their edge. So it is one of those things you can't really ask anyone. It's like asking somebody how to be a billionaire. That they're not really going to tell you.
I think it's a fair point, and I would say one of the things we do is we like to look geographically in a very broad way. So we look at the US, Australia, et cetera, all these kind of things. Your point's absolutely right. It is very difficult. You have to spend a lot of time on these things. The more detailed modeling you do does not necessarily guarantee you'll have a better insight. So there's a balance to be had, keeping the models detailed, but not so detailed that they can't be managed. It just requires time. It also, I would say to all investors that you need to read around the subject. You can't just rely on focusing on your vertical. And in fact, often what you find is people invest in just mining, but they need to look at the vertical and then they need to look across. And that's the kind of thing that we're able to do as well.
Yeah, but most of the companies that I look at, that you sort of feel that they're sort of traveling on a wing and a prayer, and I don't know what kind of model you could have for. I mean, say it was Eurasia at the moment, or Premier African Minerals, or Vast, or in the the companies where each new RNS is a revelation. Perhaps sometimes just because the company's still going, but I don't see even the management there wouldn't be able to model anything. They just say, well, okay, we've got a hole in the ground there. We're trying to produce out of it, and we need 400 grand because the guy across the road, with a bulldozer, has said, I'll charge you 400 grand to dig a hole. So the modeling might work on Diageo, or maybe probably wouldn't work on that now at the moment, but on the bigger companies. But on the small companies, is there anything to model?
Yeah, there is, because what you do is you set up a model that says, look, given a fair wind, this is what this company ought to look like, given what they've said. So you've raised several important points actually here. But then you have to apply probability theory to that. So you've got to think in terms of what is the probability of this coming to pass? That's your starting point. After that, it's about what are the management doing? How are they communicating? Are they able to build trust? And how are they going about doing that? And I think there are two ways of looking at trust. There's digital trust, which is about content of RNSs, it's about availability on LinkedIn, etc. And then there is the trust that you develop from meeting those management teams as well. But again, in the end, if somebody really, really wants to get away with something and they're skilled at it, it's going to be very, very difficult to find that out. So this is why of course, you have to have a distributed portfolio. You can't just invest in 3 stocks and hope that's going to work, because inevitably that will not work.
But you said, somebody wants to get away with it, implies there's something sort of slightly underhand, but there's just situations normally, a bit like in politics that we have at the moment, that the people involved are just not up to scratch. I mean, they are completely second-rate people, and they couldn't run a wealth stall, let alone the country. And therefore, it's not actually Keir Starmer being, trying to lie or deceive. He's just not up to the job. And management, I think, is the important point here. At the moment, we don't have a great manager in the country, and it shows. It shows. So we have growth, we have alleged growth of probably 0.01% in August or whatever it was during the week. We'll have inflation under 2%, which is all great, which obviously Rishi managed to achieve, and has nothing to do with this government at all. And so that's the thing. The country and the companies, they can have a similar type of vibe in that way, that just a lot of these small caps, they don't attract the proper management accounts, accountants, etc. They attract people who wanted to be CEO of IBM, but they could only get a job at Minnow PLC, and that's the problem. But they're going around, I'm CEO, I'm really important, and everything else. And even worse, they don't actually understand the business that they're probably running. They managed to get a job in a struggling mining company, but actually their real skill, if they had any before, was oil and gas. But they try and be, it's just been politics again. Somebody, one week you're Minister of Education, the next week you're Minister of Health. You haven't got a clue about one or the other, but you just pass the parcel. So that's really, I think, from what you said, maybe it's a key point. I don't know.
I think it is an important point. Zach, you get this issue where people are put into positions which they're not ideally qualified for. I am very much a believer in a technocratic government. A lot of, by way of example, I mean, a lot of people disagree with that because they believe, politics is about how things feel. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, you need people who can execute at the technical level. And when you talk about the management teams of smaller companies, this is a very interesting issue. You are right. It attracts a certain type of individual, has certain types of skills, which should be, that is a positive thing. But if the CEO's job really is to sell, which arguably it is, then the CEO does still need technicians within that team to run the organization and the operations. And you're right that sometimes I sense that somebody has approached a company and say, you ought to go public, or you ought to upgrade to the next standard of listing. And really, that's driven by somebody wanting to create fees as an advisor, which is, that's business. It's perfectly reasonable. But I think often the management teams don't really understand what is required. They seem to think that you get listed and then the share price will be looked after by the market, which, I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh no, it's always looked these days. It's always looked after, but not in a good way. You are trading at half NAV, half book value, half cash. Anything which is supposed to happen has no, there's no premium on anything that happened. I think Greenex was a company. I think they just won a 250 million euro case against the government of Poland, and the shares were 35p, so maybe the market cap was 20 million. On the morning, they went up to 70p, and then they went all the way back to 40 million, because the market is just that bad. The market doesn't either have the money to follow an idea or follow an event. So people just, they couldn't put their 5-10 grand down into that stock. They can't hot carry positions. And then when something happens, everyone who wanted to get out for the last 10 years gets out of the stock.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a legitimate investment management tactic, sell it into positive news if you want to change your position. I think, they've been beaten up for a long time, a lot of stocks. But there is also an issue that information flow is very poor. I mean, I was looking at a recent RNS, which it drove me round the bend because I looked at it, I thought this RNS creates more doubt than it solves. And I know that that RNS was designed to try and alleviate doubt in the market and build trust. And it did exactly the opposite because it wasn't brilliantly drafted. It missed all the key information that you actually would have wanted to know. And the way that somebody who was wanted to short that stock would have said is somebody's allowed this RNS to go out. There is nothing behind it. It could just all be made up. That's the problem you have. And then you've got to firefight that sentiment traveling around people who want to short the stock. So there are a whole range of issues. Quality of RNS, sometimes quality of the press releases. Is there actually any information in them? I mean, this is the problem. If you do that, all you're doing is creating doubt in something that's already a vacuum. There's not enough research coverage. There's not enough quality PR coverage. I mean, basically RNSs are poorly drafted. It's partly about the rules. It's not the broker's fault entirely. They are constrained by the lawyers. They are constrained because they're a policeman on one side, but then they're advisor and promoter on the other side. I use promoter in the best sense of that word. It's their job. But that in a way, they're often on a hiding to nothing, and this is why you get these terrible RNSs, in my view.
And just going on to the sort of the wildlife in our area, you talked about the sort of the brokers and the people saying, oh, you should list, you'll be this and all that sort of stuff. What's your view of the standard of people that we have in our area? Because I don't meet that many people who've had 35 years in the saddle, as I have, and probably you literally have it in the saddle because you're a horsey person. But 35 years in the saddle, and they know the market. They've watched it every day in, day out. Versus the sort of the amateurs, I would say, people who used to be selling shoes, but now they're selling they're selling small cap companies, and just the cowboys. There's not, even though we're now very regulated. There's so many areas where you just have people who are just salespeople rather than having any knowledge, and it's a sales and marketing business for themselves. A lot of services I think are just sales and marketing for the company that's doing it. No, there's no service at all. It's just an exercise. I'll phone you up, Christoper, and I'll say I'm going to sell you a new shirt, and you have a new shirt every month, cost you 10 quid. And that's the business. Nobody can, the shirt is irrelevant. It's just a sales technique. And mostly CEOs that I've seen, and obviously I interview, not say dozens, but many a month. They haven't got a clue about PR. They haven't got a clue about corporate broking. They haven't got a clue about communications. They were doing whatever they were doing before. Maybe running a coal mine in Mozambique or something like that. And then they've come to market. Plethora of rules, bureaucracy, red tape, and just there are bills. There's, what's that for? Oh, you've got to pay it. And there's this rule that you've got to follow. What is that? All this sort of stuff like that. I mean, it's no surprise off the back of that we've got the result in the stock market that we have, and it's obviously probably going to get much worse from October the 30th. So the lay of the land, the situation that we're in, is it something that can even be changed?
I think it can, but it requires will. It requires the entirety of the city to get involved in it. What you are describing is there are 2 points I think that you made there that are really important. One is you're talking about the difference between B2B consultative selling and just selling. And I absolutely agree with you that there is an element of, I remember when I first joined the city, somebody asked me, what is the difference between a corporate financier and a salesman? And they said, well, the corporate financiers are the most sophisticated salespeople, but in the end, most people are selling apples or oranges, and they're just trying to show you the difference between the two, and they hope you prefer the apple to the orange. But if you don't, they've always got the orange. I think the other thing is that you're talking about C-suites being unsophisticated at the small cap level in terms of understanding what a public listing really requires, what it means, and how much resource they have to devote to making markets work for them. That's because they're not trained and they're not guided when they come to market or before. And then they're left to their own devices afterwards. And that's really a failing of the system. And it requires everybody to change that. but it can be changed. It requires training, basically.
Yeah, but I mean,
Or coaching.
yeah, you judge companies by the RNSs or this or that. I judge many companies by their service providers, and so if I know they've gone to service provider X, it's because they've got no money. They're smooth talkers at service X, and they pay them in shares, and they sort of they talk the talk and everything else. And
Yeah, that's a problem.
and that's a problem. The other problem, there's a company which probably do with your help, and I wish they were. I hope they will become a client. They went, the guy just phoned me up, lovely guy, just said, "Oh, we've just signed up one of your competitors." I said, "Oh no, not that, not them." It's just like, whoa. Nobody likes them anymore. They were named 10 years ago. They're really expensive. They make you look as though you've paid a lot of money because you were desperate, and they probably took you out to lunch and did this and did that. But there's no, it was just like a zero. But it was a fait accompli, so it's like, okay, well, you've done it now. Let's try and do something else, But that's the thing, the service providers, but they managed to get them, right? They managed to snare. Then some other companies will just get them because they were really cheap. Won't cost you anything for the first 3 months. We've got no followers. We've got no following. Nobody reads what we produce or anything else. Nobody will listen to the interview, but it was just cheap. So it becomes a sort of spiral. And at the moment, we're in that kind of spiral because money's tight. It's October now. There's only another 6 weeks to raise money for the year. So many companies will be placing now. October, November. I think THD just raised 95 million. I'm not quite sure who. I'm not sure there's 95 million pounds in the country actually for that. I mean, the boy's done really well. Whoever raised money for them has done really well, even if it was deeply discounted. But that's the thing. I mean, you do, as I said, when you've been around the block, you do sometimes just put your hands, oh no.
I mean, Zak, it's totally right. Sometimes people ask us to look at a company, potentially see if we can assist in some way, or if we think that investors require some assistance and some support. And then you look at the list of advisors, and we now are beginning to have a filtering process which says, where the investment committee says, if they've got those advisors on board, this is not something we can help with.
Yeah, you judge a company by the company they keep.
To some extent, certainly. I mean, if they reach out to us and say, we've had a lot of rubbish, we want to change things, okay, different matter. But if we're going to be asked to plug into certain types of advisors and groups of advisors, then we step away because, I mean, it's not worth the brand reputation.
All right. Well, hopefully, once you're recovered, I'm going to throw one or two company ideas at you and one or two RNSs. I wanted, and I should have sent you the latest Avacta RNS, which I think would have baffled Einstein, Marie Curie, and also a Nobel scientist. But unfortunately, I didn't have time to do that. But maybe you can look at that. But I did actually talk about it on yesterday's video, which I do, the weekend markets one. And I was saying, what's polyamylase 2.3, 5.62? And what's that? I mean, I do know what the company does, and some people thought I didn't understand. I was saying that as, seriously and stuff like that. I mean, I followed the company for years, but there is no one on earth who's, under PhD level who would honestly say they understood that RNS. And they're going to a symposium in Barcelona at the end of the month. I hope hopefully we'll both be there as well. But that kind of communication, which is what I was saying, I was saying that kind of communication. I mean, apart from showing that it's really complicated and really, sounds really complex. It wouldn't
the inverse of what you want, of course.
Exactly. And there was no little comment from the company saying, we're delighted to be going to this symposium in Barcelona. We feel a lot of big pharma are going to be there and we're going to get it over the line or whatever it was. It was just a data dump of, of jargon. And the other point is, I like the company. If it's a cure for cancer, I want it to work because I could be in the firing line there.
Well, absolutely.
And so, but the shares are now 50p. My view is, if they did proper communications, the shares could be £3 or £4 or something like that.
Well, they're interesting.
It's a 200 million pound. Yeah, it's a 200 million pound company. it's loved by private investors. If you say anything negative, you get shot down like a clay pigeon by all because they're so defensive about their company. But yeah, that was just. I mean, you should read it when you recover. It was a joy to read because it was so it was so complicated. And when you're competing with another 300 RNSs on the day, that's probably not the way to go. But I like to look at that. But just to finish off, so I know you've got to head off and go back to your sick bed. But just in terms of ACF, what do you feel are the sort of what are you most proud of at ACF and what you've done and what you're doing?
I think culture. I think we're most proud of the culture within the firm. We have this international culture that's very global in its outlook. We allow people to work wherever they want to work from. We use technology. All the time we've been doing it for 15 years, and it works very, very well. We have very
do you allow them
loyal
not to
team.
work? Do you allow them not to work sometime as well?
I do like them not to work sometimes as well. Yeah. So we instituted about, I don't know how long ago now, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we instituted a half day on a Friday. It's
Whoa.
worked really, really well.
Okay, all
It works
right.
extremely well because we ask them to work long hours, so if we can give them something in return, and what we get is incredible loyalty and smart people who love the job, digging into companies or trying to help companies be better or trying to help investors understand the companies. So I think if I was to say anything, that's the thing that I would be most proud of, the culture that we've created.
On that note, Christoper Nicholson, Managing Director at ACF Equity Research, thank you very much. And hopefully I will throw the odd RNS at you and we can have a chat about that or chat about a company that is of it.
Anytime. I always like to be privately irritated.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Zach. Take care.